32,000 years ago, Cro-Magnon people came up with the lunar calendar, which is actually the first calendar in human history. But if you think about it, 4.5 billion years of Earth's history is a huge chunk of time compared to how long we've been figuring out what a day is. Thanks to science, especially geology, we've been able to estimate the different periods of Earth. We know about the Jurassic period, but how do we even define an era? And why do we call them by those names? And today we're going to take a journey from the past to the present and explore the different epochs of Earth through a video series on all its geological periods. Geological time is a super important tool that geologists use in their research. They measure periods and put them in context by years, often using terms like MA, mega annum, which is 1,000,000 years, and KA, kilo annum, which is 1,000 years. Understanding geological time gives us a broader view of how Earth has changed over time. It also helps scientists predict and analyze future movements and changes in our planet. To figure out geological age, scientists usually use a few methods. Radiometric dating, which looks at the ratio of parent and daughter isotopes in rock samples. Fossil dating, which determines a rock's age by looking at fossils of species that existed for a short time. They also examine the order of soil and rock layers to figure out the age based on the relative position of the strata. The top layer is generally younger than the ones below it. So thanks to these methods, scientists can estimate the age of a fossilized bone from millions of years ago. Now, with all this geological dating, how do we divide the timelines of the distant past? Let's move on to our next topic. Earth's 4.543 billion years are divided into 4 eons, and the first one is called the Hadean eon. This eon spans from when Earth started forming until about 3.8 billion years ago. The name Hadean comes from Hades, the Greek god of the underworld, which paints a picture of hellish conditions on Earth back then. Next up is the Archean eon, lasting from the end of the Hadean until about 2.5 billion years ago. During this time, the sun was a lot dimmer than it is now, so Earth wasn't as hot as you might think. The atmosphere had way less oxygen, mostly produced by water breaking down under ultraviolet rays. It wasn't until the end of the Archean that, thanks to cyanobacteria starting photosynthesis, oxygen levels in the atmosphere began to rise, setting the stage for a significant oxidation event in the Proterozoic eon that followed. The Proterozoic eon lasted from the end of the Archean until about 541 million years ago, covering more than 2 billion years, making it a really long period. Of course, this was a crucial time for Earth as the first forms of life began to diversify. Predation became a natural part of the ecosystem, with bigger animals eating smaller ones, like orcas hunting seals, seals eating squid, and squid munching on mollusks. All these animals needed oxygen to get energy from their food, but the first forms of life on Earth didn't need it. For most of its history, Earth was pretty much an oxygen-free zone filled with methane, making it a tough place for animals to thrive. The earliest life forms we know about were microorganisms, which left traces of their existence in fossils that are around 3.5 billion years old. These traces include a type of carbon molecule made by living things, and we also find evidence of these microorganisms preserved in hard structures called stromatolites, which they created about 3.5 billion years ago. Stromatolites form when layers of microorganisms stick together and bind sediments, with minerals precipitating in these layers to create strong structures that last even after the microorganisms die. When cyanobacteria showed up in the Archean eon, they caused some pretty big changes, becoming the first photosynthetic organisms on Earth. They pulled food from water and energy from sunlight, which led to the release of oxygen. This caused a sudden spike in oxygen levels, making the environment less friendly for other anaerobic microorganisms that couldn't survive in high oxygen conditions. Oxygen levels stabilized at lower amounts, and stayed that way for a couple of billion years, mostly because the cyanobacteria were both increasing and decreasing oxygen levels. When they died, they decomposed in the water, which reduced oxygen levels again. So the oceans still weren't great for most oxygen-hungry life forms. Even so, these early microorganisms didn't have the specialized cells needed for complex bodies. Today's animals have all sorts of cells, like skin, blood, and bones, containing organelles, each doing a different job. These microorganisms, on the other hand, were just single cells without organelles and no nuclei to make their DNA. But then, something revolutionary happened. Some microorganisms started living inside others, acting like organelles for them. They evolved into a mutually beneficial relationship where energy organelles would turn food into energy. For the first time, DNA was being made inside nuclei, leading to new complex cells called eukaryotic cells. These cells had specialized parts to do specific tasks, supporting the whole cell, and from this, the first animals emerged during the latter half of the Proterozoic eon, about 800 million years ago. These clusters of cells living together eventually became the first animals. Sponges are one of those early animal species, and even though oxygen levels in the ocean were still low compared to today, sponges could handle low oxygen conditions. Like other animals, they need oxygen for metabolism, but not as much since they aren't very active. They feed without moving by filtering food particles from water pumped through their specialized cells. The evolution of these complex and diverse bodies led to a split into many different animals, resulting in a wide variety of species. Some aspects of human DNA and the complete DNA of all animals have been working in ways similar to that of prehistoric sponges. This mechanism drives gene expression, a key factor in the diversity of life in the animal kingdom. Ediacaran period. An eon includes eras, with each era typically lasting from several hundred million to 1 billion years. An era consists of many periods or systems, marking the time since their end. The Ediacaran period belongs to the Neo-Proterozoic era, the last era of the Proterozoic eon. All the timelines before this are known as the Pre-Cambrian stage. About 580 million years ago, during the Ediacaran period, besides sponges, there were new marine organisms appearing and evolving with leaf-like shapes, with fossil evidence found in sedimentary rocks around the globe. These ancient animals are referred to as the Ediacara biota, based on the earliest fossils discovered, providing evidence of complex multicellular organisms like Kimberella, which looked like a slug. Researchers found phytosterol molecules preserved in these creatures' guts. This phytosterol, usually found in plants, indicates they were feeding on algae and bacteria from the ocean floor. Paleontologists believe Kimberella could have been one of the most advanced organisms of the Ediacaran period, as it had a mouth, gut, and a digestive process like modern animals. However, by the end of the Ediacaran period, rising oxygen levels reached a point where oxygen-dependent life forms could thrive. The first sponges may have helped increase oxygen levels by consuming bacteria and removing them from decomposition processes. Fossils of a creature named Dickinsonia show it could move along the seafloor and consume bacterial layers. The evolution of these multicellular organisms dramatically changed Earth's living environment, leading to the planet's first extinction event. Ediacaran extinction. The Ediacaran extinction occurred about 541 million years ago, marking the end of the Ediacaran period and the start of the Cambrian period. Environmental changes like rising oxygen levels in the air and water allowed new groups of animals to develop during the Cambrian and created a new environment that the Ediacara organisms couldn't adapt to, resulting in the extinction of around 80 species during this time. This opened the door for a new era of more complex animals. These organisms began to multiply and evolve, leading to the world we know today. And that's the start of our series about the epochs of ancient Earth. We're explaining what the Pre-Cambrian stage is, talking about the first forms of life on Earth and why they disappeared. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like, subscribe to the team, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any upcoming videos. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next time.